Welcome to Life Stories, where we bring you heartfelt and inspiring tales of resilience, hope, and transformation. Today, we share the incredible journey of Emily, a woman who faced unimaginable challenges but found the strength to rise above them. Through heartbreak and adversity, she discovered her inner power and rebuilt her life from the ashes, becoming a beacon of hope for others. This is a story of courage, determination, and the unyielding human spirit. Don't forget to subscribe to Life Stories to join us as we begin this powerful and unforgettable journey today. I never imagined my life would change so drastically. Standing there in the driveway of our suburban Chicago home, the crisp autumn air carrying the acrid smell of burning fabric, I watched the flames devour everything I owned. My clothes, every cherished piece, every memory they held, were reduced to ashes. The fire's orange glow lit up James's face, twisted in rage, while his mother, Margaret, stood nearby with a smug, triumphant smirk. This was the moment my life reached its breaking point, and though I didn't know it then, it was also the moment it began again. James hadn't always been this way. I used to think he was my soulmate. We met at a quaint coffee shop in downtown Chicago 5 years ago. I remember the way his smile could brighten even the dullest day and how his laugh seemed to echo through my heart. We'd sit there for hours, drinking lattes and sharing dreams. His presence felt safe, warm, like I'd found the person who truly saw me. When he proposed a year later, under the city's twinkling skyline, I said yes without hesitation. We were so full of hope, so certain that love could weather any storm. Our wedding was a beautiful affair. My parents were so proud as they watched us exchange vows, and the future seemed to stretch out before us, limitless and golden. But as the months turned into years, the man I'd fallen in love with began to fade away, replaced by someone colder, harsher, and unrecognizable. It started with small things, a dismissive comment about how I cooked dinner, a subtle shift in his tone when I tried to share my thoughts. "Darling," he'd say, his voice dripping with condescension. "Don't you think you could try a little harder? My mother's pot roast is legendary." It was always his mother. Margaret's shadow loomed over our lives from the moment we said I do. Margaret moved in with us shortly after our wedding. She claimed loneliness as her reason, insisting that she needed to be near James, her precious boy. At first, I tried to make it work. I wanted to build a relationship with her, to find common ground with the woman who had raised the man I loved. But Margaret made it clear from the start that she didn't see me as an equal, let alone as someone worthy of her son. She nitpicked every detail of my life, how I folded laundry, how I decorated the house, even how I dressed. "Oh, Emily," she'd say with a sigh of mock pity, "I suppose you just weren't raised to know these things. Let me show you how it's done." It wasn't just the constant criticism that chipped away at me, it was James's silence. He never defended me, never stood up to Margaret on my behalf. Every time I tried to talk to him about how her words were hurting me, he brushed me off. "She means well," he'd say. "You just need to learn to get along with her." But how could I get along with someone who saw me as nothing more than an unwelcome guest in my own home? Still, I swallowed my pride, bit my tongue, and did everything I could to be the perfect wife and daughter-in-law they seemed to expect. I thought if I just tried hard enough, I could make them see my worth. But no matter what I did, it was never enough. The breaking point came on a seemingly ordinary evening. Margaret had asked me to prepare her favorite meal, a complicated French dish I'd never made before. I spent hours in the kitchen, carefully following the recipe step by step, determined to prove to her, and to myself, that I could succeed. When I finally served dinner, my hands were trembling slightly as I set the plates down. Margaret took one bite, her face contorting in exaggerated disgust, and spat the food back onto her plate. "This is inedible," she declared, pushing the dish away. "I can't believe you'd serve this to your family. Thomas, darling, I think it's time we discussed finding someone more capable to take care of the household." Her words hit me like a blow to the chest. Something inside me broke. Years of frustration, humiliation, and hurt came flooding to the surface. My voice was steady, but my hands were shaking as I said, "I've had enough. I've spent years trying to please you both. But no matter what I do, it's never good enough. I'm done." The room fell silent. The kind of silence that feels thick and suffocating. Margaret looked smug, as though my outburst had confirmed every low opinion she had of me. But it was James's reaction that stunned me the most. He didn't yell, didn't argue. Instead, he stood abruptly, his face dark with anger, and stormed upstairs. I heard the sounds of drawers being yanked open and closet doors slamming. Moments later, he came back down, his arms filled with my clothes, every dress, every blouse, every pair of jeans I owned. Without a word, he marched to the front door and out onto the driveway. I followed, my heart pounding, unable to comprehend what he was doing until I saw him pull a lighter from his pocket. "James." "No," I gasped. But he ignored me. With a flick of his thumb, he lit the lighter and set it to the edge of my favorite sweater. The flames spread quickly, devouring the fabric, and soon the entire pile was ablaze. The heat of the fire was overwhelming, but it couldn't match the cold fury in James's voice when he finally spoke. "If you're done," he spat, "then you won't need these anymore." Margaret appeared in the doorway, her face illuminated by the firelight. She looked satisfied, as though this was the outcome she had been orchestrating all along. I stood there, rooted to the spot, as my memories went up in smoke. The dress I wore to my college graduation, the scarf my grandmother knitted for me, the sweater I wore on our first anniversary, all of it was gone. When James turned to me, his eyes cold and unfamiliar, he delivered the final blow. "If you don't like it, sign the divorce papers and leave. You're as good as worthless to me if you won't listen." In that moment, something shifted inside me. The fear, the hurt, the confusion, they all melted away, replaced by an eerie calm. I looked at James, really looked at him, and saw not the man I had once loved but a stranger. I glanced at Margaret, her smirk still firmly in place, and felt nothing but pity. Without a word, I turned and walked back into the house. On the kitchen table lay the divorce papers James had apparently prepared in advance. My hand didn't shake as I picked up the pen and signed my name. There was no hesitation, no second guessing, just a quiet certainty that this chapter of my life was over. I grabbed my purse from the hook by the door, checking to make sure my wallet and phone were inside. They were the only possessions I had left now. But somehow, I felt lighter than I had in years. As I stepped out the door and onto the street, Margaret's shrill voice rang out behind me. "Good riddance," she hissed. "You were never good enough for my Thomas." I didn't look back. For the first time in years, I felt free. The night air was cool against my face, and each step I took away from that house felt like shedding a weight I hadn't realized I'd been carrying. I had no plan, no destination, but I had something more important, the courage to walk away. And as I walked into the night, I knew that this wasn't the end, it was the beginning. The streets of Chicago felt strangely unfamiliar as I wandered aimlessly, my mind racing with a million questions and emotions. I had no destination in mind, no plan for what came next. My feet carried me past the rows of familiar houses, through the park where James and I used to sit on lazy Sunday afternoons, and onto the main street where the city lights glittered like tiny beacons. But tonight, those lights didn't feel comforting. They felt distant, almost mocking. Everything around me reminded me of the life I was leaving behind, a life that had been slowly suffocating me for years. I couldn't believe how far I'd fallen. When I married James, I was so full of hope, convinced that we would build a life of love and partnership. I had dreams then, dreams of pursuing my passion for art, maybe even opening a small gallery one day. But those dreams had slowly faded under the weight of James's expectations and Margaret's constant criticism. I had become a shadow of the woman I once was, living in a world where my worth was measured by how well I catered to someone else's needs. And now, even the remnants of that life, my clothes, my home, had been taken from me, reduced to ash in a single, fiery moment. As I rounded a corner, the cool autumn air nipping at my cheeks, my phone buzzed in my pocket. For a moment, I considered ignoring it. I wasn't ready to explain what had happened, to face the inevitable questions and pity from friends or family. But then I saw the name on the screen, Sophia. Sophia had been my best friend in college. We'd shared everything, our hopes, our fears, our dreams for the future. But after I married James, our calls became less frequent, our meetings rarer. It wasn't that Sophia stopped caring, it was that I stopped reaching out. I had been too consumed by my marriage, too ashamed to admit that things weren't as perfect as they seemed. The last time we spoke, Sophia had voiced her concerns about James, about how he seemed controlling and dismissive. I brushed her off then, unwilling to face the truth. Now, as I stared at her name on my screen, a lump formed in my throat. I hesitated for only a moment before answering. Sophia, I said, my voice trembling. Emily, her warm, familiar voice was tinged with concern. What's wrong? Are you okay? The sound of her voice was enough to break the dam I'd been holding back all night. Tears spilled down my cheeks as I choked out the words. I need help. There was a pause. But it wasn't the kind of pause that comes from judgment or hesitation. It was the kind of pause that comes from love. From someone trying to figure out the best way to help without overwhelming you. Where are you? Sophia asked, her voice steady. I'm coming to get you. I gave her my location, my fingers trembling as I wiped away my tears. For the first time in what felt like forever, I didn't feel completely alone. I sat on a park bench, watching the city buzz around me, and waited. The minutes stretched on, but I didn't feel impatient. I just felt hollow, empty, like a shell of the person I once was. When Sophia finally arrived, she didn't say a word. She just got out of her car, walked over to me, and pulled me into the tightest hug I'd ever experienced. The scent of her familiar floral perfume brought back memories of happier times, our late-night study sessions, our spontaneous road trips, our endless conversations about life and love. For the first time that night, I felt safe. Let's get you out of here, Sophia said softly, guiding me to her car. The drive to her apartment was quiet, but it wasn't an uncomfortable silence. It was the kind of silence that allowed me to catch my breath, to process everything that had just happened. Sophia didn't push me to talk, and I was grateful for that. Her apartment was small but cozy, filled with warm colors and personal touches that made it feel like a true home. She handed me a pair of her pajamas and set a steaming cup of tea on the table in front of me. Take your time, she said, sitting across from me with her own mug. Whenever you're ready. The words spilled out of me in a torrent, everything I had been holding in for years. I told her about Margaret's constant belittling, about James's dismissiveness, about how I had lost myself trying to please them. And then I told her about tonight, about the fire, about the divorce papers, about how I had finally reached my breaking point. Sophia listened intently, her expression a mixture of heartbreak and anger. Emily, she said when I finally stopped talking, this isn't your fault. None of this is your fault. You've been living in a toxic environment, and you did everything you could to survive. But now, it's time to start living for yourself. Her words hit me like a wave. Living for myself. It sounded so simple, but it was something I hadn't done in years. I had been so focused on trying to meet everyone else's expectations that I had forgotten who I was. What I wanted. For the first time in a long time, I allowed myself to think about what that might look like. That night, curled up on Sophia's spare bed, I cried myself to sleep. But these tears felt different. They weren't tears of frustration or despair, they were tears of release. I was letting go of the weight I had been carrying for so long, shedding the pieces of myself that no longer served me. And as I drifted off to sleep, I felt a small flicker of hope start to ignite within me. The next morning, the world felt a little brighter. Sophia handed me a notebook and a pen, insisting that I start writing down everything I wanted to do, everything I wanted to be. At first, the blank page seemed intimidating, but as I began to write, the words flowed easily. Travel, paint, start over, find myself. It wasn't a plan, it wasn't even a clear vision of the future, but it was a start. And for the first time in years, that was enough. The next few days were a whirlwind of activity, but they felt strangely grounding at the same time. Sophia was like a lifeline, keeping me focused on the present, helping me regain control of the little things I had lost. She suggested practical steps, basic but essential ones, like getting new clothes to replace the ones James had destroyed, updating my resume, and figuring out where I could stay in the long term. Her calm and steady presence was exactly what I needed. She didn't overwhelm me with grand plans or false promises. Just small, achievable goals that helped me put one foot in front of the other. The first stop was a second-hand shop on the edge of the city. It wasn't glamorous, but it didn't need to be. As we sifted through racks of clothes, I felt like I was rediscovering a part of myself I had almost forgotten existed. I picked out soft sweaters, comfortable jeans, and a flowy sundress that made Sophia grin. "This is more like it," she said as I held the dress up against myself. "I haven't seen you wear anything like this in years. It's so, you." I blinked, taken aback by her comment. "What do you mean?" Sophia smiled, shaking her head. "I mean, the Emily I knew in college loved bright colors and anything that flowed. You had this effortless style. Somewhere along the way, it disappeared, replaced by all those beige cardigans and pencil skirts. I hadn't even realized it until now. But she was right. I had lost my sense of self somewhere along the way, dressing in ways that felt safe and predictable, hiding my personality behind muted tones and bland designs. Holding the dress, I felt a small spark of defiance. I wanted to wear it, not for anyone else, but for me. After we left the shop, we stopped at a little cafe nearby. As we sipped coffee and nibbled on pastries, Sophia turned the conversation to the future. "Have you thought about what you want to do next?" she asked gently. "You don't have to figure it all out at once, but it might help to think about the first few steps." I stared at the foam in my cappuccino, feeling overwhelmed by the question. What did I want? For years, my life had revolved around James and Margaret, leaving no room for my own ambitions or desires. Now, the possibilities felt endless, but they were also terrifying. It was like standing on the edge of a cliff, looking down at the vast unknown. "I don't know," I admitted. "I've spent so long trying to make other people happy that I don't even know what I want anymore. I used to love art." But I trailed off, unsure of how to finish the sentence. Sophia reached across the table and placed a hand over mine. "But nothing," she said firmly. "You don't have to have all the answers right now. Start with what makes you happy. Paint something, even if it's just for fun. You don't need anyone's permission to explore your passions again." Her words stayed with me as we returned to her apartment. That night, while Sophia worked on her laptop, I rummaged through one of her storage closets and found an old sketchpad and a set of colored pencils. Sitting cross-legged on the floor, I began to draw. My hand felt clumsy and unsure at first, but the motions quickly became familiar. Before I knew it, I had filled an entire page with swirling patterns and vibrant colors. For the first time in what felt like forever, I felt a flicker of joy, pure, unfiltered joy. The next morning, I woke up feeling lighter. I made myself a cup of coffee and sat at the small kitchen table with Sophia, who was scrolling through her phone. I was thinking. I began hesitantly. "I want to look for a job. Something small to start with. I need to feel like I'm doing something, contributing to something." Sophia beamed at me. That's a great idea. Emily, let's update your resume and start looking. Updating my resume was a bittersweet process. As I typed out my past work experience, I couldn't help but feel a pang of regret for the years I had lost, years where I had put my own career on hold to support James's ambitions. But as I looked at the finished product, I felt a sense of pride. I had skills. I had something to offer. I wasn't just a shell of a person, I was capable, resourceful, and ready to rebuild. Within a week, I landed an interview at a small marketing firm in the city. The position was entry-level. Nothing flashy, but it was a step in the right direction. Sophia helped me prepare, running mock interviews and giving me pointers on how to present myself. By the time the day of the interview arrived, I felt more confident than I had in years. The office was bright and modern, with big windows that let in streams of sunlight. The woman interviewing me, Diane, was warm and approachable, putting me at ease almost immediately. As we talked, I found myself slipping into a rhythm, remembering the passion I once had for marketing and strategy. At the end of the interview, Diane smiled and said, "You've got the job, Emily. Welcome to the team." I nearly cried right then and there. After everything I had been through, this small victory felt monumental. I couldn't wait to tell Sophia, who was waiting anxiously outside the office building. When I stepped outside, she rushed toward me, her eyes wide with anticipation. "Well?" she asked breathlessly. "I got it," I said, my voice shaking with emotion. Sophia let out a whoop of joy and pulled me into a hug. "I'm so proud of you," she exclaimed. "This is just the beginning, Emily. I can feel it." As we celebrated with lunch at a nearby diner, I couldn't help but feel a sense of hope taking root in my chest. For the first time in years, I felt like I was in control of my own life. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, I knew that, but I was finally moving forward. And that, I realized, was the most important step of all. The first few weeks at the marketing firm were both exciting and nerve-wracking. It had been years since I'd been in a professional environment, and I wasn't sure how quickly I'd adjust. But Diane, my boss, was kind and encouraging, and the rest of the team welcomed me without hesitation. My work mostly consisted of assisting with small campaigns and brainstorming sessions, but every task felt like a stepping stone toward reclaiming my identity. One afternoon, as I was working on copy for a new campaign, Diane stopped by my desk. "Emily, can I have a word?" she asked with a warm smile. I followed her into her office, my nerves prickling. Despite how supportive she'd been, there was still a part of me that feared criticism or rejection. Years of trying to please James and Margaret had trained me to anticipate disapproval at every turn. Diane motioned for me to sit and leaned forward on her desk. "I just wanted to tell you how impressed I've been with your work so far," she began. "You've brought a fresh perspective to the team, and your creativity really shines through in your ideas." Her words felt like a balm to my frayed nerves. "Thank you," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "That means so much to me." She nodded, her expression softening. "I know you mentioned during your interview that you've been out of the workforce for a while. I just want to say, it doesn't show. You're doing an incredible job." For the rest of the day, I walked on air. Her words replayed in my mind like a song, filling me with a confidence I hadn't felt in years. It was a small moment, but it marked a turning point. I realized that I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. That evening, I shared the news with Sophia over dinner. We'd made it a habit to cook together at least once a week, turning it into a kind of ritual. As we chopped vegetables and stirred sauces, I told her about Diane's praise. Sophia grinned, waving a wooden spoon in the air. "I told you. You're amazing. And now other people are starting to see it too. This is just the beginning, Emily." Her unwavering belief in me was both humbling and empowering. For years, I'd let James and Margaret's criticism erode my self-worth. But now, With Sophia's support and the small victories I was beginning to achieve, I felt like I was slowly piecing myself back together. One weekend, as we sat on her balcony enjoying the crisp autumn air, Sophia brought up something I hadn't considered before. "Have you thought about sharing your story?" she asked, sipping her tea. I frowned, unsure of what she meant. "You mean, like, talking about what happened with James and Margaret?" She nodded. "Yeah. I mean, you've been through so much. And look at where you are now. I think your story could inspire people, especially women who might be in similar situations." The idea made me uneasy. While I was proud of how far I'd come, I wasn't sure I was ready to open up about the darkest parts of my life. "I don't know," I said hesitantly. "It's still so raw. And what if James finds out? Or Margaret?" Sophia reached over and squeezed my hand. "You don't have to do anything you're not ready for. But think about it. You've already shown so much strength by leaving and rebuilding your life. Sharing your story could help someone else find that same strength." Her words stayed with me long after that conversation. Over the next few weeks, I found myself thinking about the countless times I had felt isolated and powerless during my marriage. What if someone had shared their story with me back then? Would it have given me the courage to leave sooner? One evening, I sat down at my laptop and opened a blank document. My fingers hovered over the keyboard as I struggled to find the right words. Finally, I began to type, starting with the night I'd left James and everything I'd lost and gained since then. The words flowed out of me in a torrent, raw and unfiltered. By the time I finished, my hands were shaking, but I felt a sense of relief. Writing it all down felt like releasing a weight I hadn't realized I was still carrying. When I showed the piece to Sophia the next day, her eyes brimmed with tears. "This is incredible, Emily," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "You need to share this." With her encouragement, I decided to start a blog. I titled it "Rising from the Ashes," a nod to how I felt I had been reborn since leaving my old life behind. I published my first post, the one I had written about my journey, and shared it with a handful of close friends. I didn't expect much of a response, but within days, the post had gained traction. Strangers began reaching out, sharing their own stories and thanking me for my honesty. One message in particular stood out. It was from a woman named Rachel, who wrote, "Reading your story gave me the courage to pack my bags and leave tonight. I don't know what's ahead, but I know I can't stay where I was. Thank you for showing me it's possible to start over." Her words brought tears to my eyes. It was humbling to know that my story had made even the smallest difference in someone's life. And it made me realize that Sophia was right. Sharing my experiences wasn't just cathartic for me, it could be a lifeline for others. Over the next few months, the blog became a central part of my life. I wrote about everything: my struggles, my triumphs, the lessons I was learning along the way. The more I shared, the more I connected with others who had faced similar challenges. It felt like I was building a community, a place where women could find support and hope. One night, as I sat on the couch drafting a new post, Sophia leaned over and said, "You know, I think this is just the beginning for you, Emily. You're meant to do something big with this." I smiled, but I couldn't quite see the bigger picture yet. For now, I was content to take things one step at a time. I didn't know where this new path would lead, but for the first time in years, I felt like I was truly living, not just surviving. And that, I realized, was the greatest victory of all. As the blog continued to grow, so did my sense of purpose. The messages I received weren't just stories, they were cries for help, for connection, for hope. Women from all walks of life were reaching out, sharing their struggles and their triumphs. Some were still trapped in toxic relationships, searching for the courage to leave. Others were further along in their journeys, offering words of wisdom and encouragement to those just starting out. It was overwhelming at times, but it also filled me with a sense of responsibility. I wasn't just telling my story anymore, I was helping others find their own. One message in particular struck a chord with me. It was from a young woman named Clara, who wrote, "I've read every post on your blog. And I feel like you're the only person who understands what I'm going through. My family keeps telling me to stay, that I made my bed and now I have to lie in it. But your story gives me hope that maybe I don't have to. How did you find the strength to leave?" Her words brought tears to my eyes. I remembered feeling exactly the same way, trapped by the weight of others' expectations and my own fear of the unknown. I responded to Clara immediately, sharing what I had learned about finding strength in small steps and listening to the quiet voice inside that says, "You deserve better." It wasn't long before Clara wrote back to tell me she had left her abusive partner. She was staying with a friend and didn't know what the future held. But she felt free for the first time in years. "I couldn't have done it without your words," she wrote. "Thank you for helping me see that I wasn't alone." I showed Sophia the message, my heart swelling with a mix of pride and humility. "This is why you're doing this," she said, squeezing my hand. "You're changing lives, Emily. One person at a time." But with the blog's success came new challenges. As more people discovered it, I began to attract attention I wasn't prepared for. Some of it was positive opportunities to collaborate with other writers and organizations. Invitations to speak at events, but not all of it. One evening, as I was going through my inbox, I came across an email from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line read, "You should stop." My stomach tightened as I clicked it open. The message was brief but chilling. "You're making a fool of yourself. No one wants to hear your sob story. Just stop." There was no name, no indication of who had sent it. But it felt like a slap in the face. I sat there staring at the screen, my confidence shaken. When I told Sophia about it later, her reaction was immediate. "Who cares what some coward hiding behind a screen thinks," she said, her voice firm. "They're probably just jealous of what you're doing. Don't let them get in your head." She was right. Of course. But the email lingered in my mind for days. It reminded me of the voice in my own head that had doubted my worth for so long. The voice James and Margaret had amplified with their constant criticism. But as I reread the messages of support from women like Clara, I realized that voice didn't have power over me anymore. I wasn't going to let fear or negativity hold me back. I had come too far to turn back now. Around this time, I started to notice a shift in my perspective. The blog, which had started as a way to process my own pain, was becoming something much bigger. I began to see patterns in the stories women shared with me, common struggles, recurring barriers, gaps in the support systems available to them. It became clear that while my words could offer encouragement, what these women really needed was concrete help, legal advice, financial guidance, safe places to stay. The idea for Phoenix Rising was born on a rainy afternoon as I sat in my favorite coffee shop, jotting down ideas in a notebook. I imagined a non-profit organization that would provide women with the resources they needed to rebuild their lives after leaving abusive relationships. Counseling, job training, workshops on financial independence, it all felt so clear in my mind. As if this was what I had been working toward all along. When I shared the idea with Sophia later that evening, she practically jumped out of her seat with excitement. "This is it, Emily," she said, beaming. "This is your calling." I smiled. But doubt gnawed at me. "It's a great idea. But where would I even start? I don't have the money, the connections. You didn't have a roadmap when you started the blog, either," Sophia pointed out. "But you figured it out. And now look at everything you've accomplished. You'll figure this out too. And I'll help you." Her belief in me was like a lifeline. Over the next few weeks, I poured myself into research, learning everything I could about starting a non-profit. I reached out to local shelters and advocacy groups, asking questions and gathering advice. Diane, my boss, was incredibly supportive when I told her about my plans. "You're going to make a real difference, Emily," she said. And when the time comes, we'll be here to help with the marketing. The more I planned, the more the idea began to take shape. I found myself waking up each morning filled with a sense of purpose, excited to take another step toward making Phoenix Rising a reality. There were moments of doubt. Of course, times when the enormity of the task felt overwhelming, but I kept reminding myself of why I was doing this. If my experiences could help even one woman find freedom and hope, then it would all be worth it. One day, as I was leaving work, I ran into a woman I hadn't seen in years. Her name was Linda, a neighbor from the old neighborhood I'd shared with James. She stopped me on the sidewalk, her eyes widening in recognition. "Emily, is that you?" I hesitated, unsure of what to say. My life with James felt like a distant memory, and I wasn't sure I wanted to revisit it. But Linda's kind smile put me at ease. "I've been following your blog," she said, her voice soft but earnest. "What you're doing is amazing. I just wanted you to know that." Her words stayed with me long after we parted ways. They reminded me of how far I'd come and how much further I wanted to go. Phoenix Rising wasn't just an idea anymore, it was a promise. A promise to myself, to Clara, to Linda, and to every woman who had ever felt trapped or alone. I was going to see it through, no matter what it took. The creation of Phoenix Rising consumed my days and nights. Each passing moment brought a new challenge, navigating legal procedures, finding funding, and building the right team, but every challenge felt purposeful. This wasn't just about building an organization, it was about giving meaning to the pain I had endured and transforming it into something that could bring light to others. The first breakthrough came one sunny afternoon as I sat in the small, shared office space I'd managed to rent with the help of a local business grant. My phone buzzed, and I saw an email from Diane. The subject line read, "Opportunity to collaborate." She had connected me with one of her old friends, Michelle, who ran a community foundation that supported non-profits working to help women in crisis. Michelle had read my blog, Diane explained, and was interested in meeting to discuss potential funding for Phoenix Rising. That meeting, held in a quaint cafe just outside the city, was a pivotal moment. Michelle was a sharp, charismatic woman with a warm smile and an air of quiet confidence. She listened intently as I laid out my vision for Phoenix Rising, nodding as I explained the need for services like financial literacy workshops, career counseling, and transitional housing. "I love what you're doing," she said when I finished. "Your story is incredibly powerful, and your passion is clear. I think we can work together to make this happen." Her words filled me with a mix of excitement and disbelief. This was exactly the kind of support I needed. But I had to remind myself to stay grounded. Michelle's offer wasn't just a promise, it was an opportunity one needed to work hard to make the most of. With Michelle's foundation providing initial funding, I could finally start turning my plans into action. The first step was finding a space for Phoenix Rising. After weeks of searching, I secured a small but welcoming office in an old brick building downtown. It wasn't much, but it was ours, a place where women could come to feel safe and supported. Next came the team. I needed people who were not only skilled but also deeply committed to the mission of Phoenix Rising. Sophia, of course, was my first recruit. Her sharp organizational skills and boundless enthusiasm made her the perfect person to help with operations. Rachel, my lawyer and now close friend, agreed to provide pro bono legal advice to our clients, ensuring they had access to the support I had so desperately needed during my own divorce. But the most unexpected addition to the team was Linda, my former neighbor. After our chance encounter, she reached out again, this time offering to volunteer. "I've been through something similar," she admitted during a meeting at the office. "I want to help other women see that there's life after leaving." Her courage and determination were inspiring, and I knew she would bring a unique perspective to our work. Slowly but surely, Phoenix Rising began to take shape. We started small, hosting workshops on topics like budgeting, resume building, and interview preparation. Women from all walks of life attended, their stories as varied as their faces. Some had escaped abusive relationships, others were simply looking for a fresh start after a tough chapter in their lives. No matter their circumstances, they found a place of understanding and support at Phoenix Rising. One woman, MIA, stood out to me in particular. She was a single mother of two, working long hours at a minimum wage job while trying to make ends meet. She came to us looking for help with her finances. But as we talked, it became clear that what she really needed was encouragement and validation. "I feel like I've failed my kids," she confessed during one of our sessions, her voice breaking. "I just want to give them a better life. But I don't know how." I reached across the table and took her hand. "MIA, you're here. You're trying. That's not failure, that's strength. And we're going to help you every step of the way." Over the weeks, MIA became a regular at our workshops. She learned how to create a budget, apply for better paying jobs, and even negotiate her wages, something she'd never considered before. The day she came in to tell us she'd landed a new job at a company that offered benefits and a livable wage, I felt like I was witnessing a miracle. Mia's success wasn't just hers, it was ours. A testament to what Phoenix Rising could achieve. Of course, not every day was filled with triumph. There were moments of doubt and frustration. Times when I questioned whether I was really making a difference. The work was emotionally draining, and the weight of responsibility sometimes felt overwhelming. But whenever I felt like giving up, I thought about the women who walked through our doors, their courage, their resilience, their determination to rebuild their lives. They were my motivation, my reminder of why this work mattered. One evening, as I was closing up the office, I noticed a package on my desk. Inside was a beautifully crafted wooden plaque with the words "Phoenix Rising, from the ashes, we rise" engraved in elegant script. There was no note, but I knew it had to be from Sophia. I ran my fingers over the smooth wood, feeling a lump rise in my throat. This was more than just a gift, it was a symbol of everything we had built together. The following weekend, we hosted an open house to celebrate Phoenix Rising's official launch. The office was buzzing with energy as women from the community mingled with our team, sharing stories and laughter over cups of coffee and plates of homemade cookies. As I looked around the room, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. This was more than I had ever dreamed of. And it was just the beginning. That night, as I sat at home reflecting on the day, I received a message from Clara, the woman whose email had first inspired me to create Phoenix Rising. She wrote, "I just wanted to thank you again for everything you've done. Your courage gave me the strength to start over. And now I'm finally in a place where I feel happy and safe. You changed my life, Emily." Tears filled my eyes as I read her words. Clara's message was a reminder that the work we were doing mattered. It was proof that even the smallest act of kindness could ripple outward, touching lives in ways we might never fully understand. As I closed my laptop and prepared for bed, I thought about the journey that had brought me here. The pain, the fear, the uncertainty, they had all led to this moment, to this purpose. Phoenix Rising wasn't just a non-profit, it was a testament to the power of resilience. A beacon of hope for women who needed to know they weren't alone. And for me, it was a new beginning. A reminder that even after the darkest night, the sun would rise again. As the story of Phoenix Rising comes to an end, Emily's journey is a powerful reminder that even in our darkest moments, there's always a chance to rebuild, to heal, and to grow stronger. From the ashes of her past, she not only reclaimed her life but also became a guiding light for others, proving that courage and resilience can create ripples of hope. Through determination, empathy, and the support of those who believed in her, Emily turned her pain into purpose, helping countless women rise above their struggles and embrace a future full of possibilities. Her story inspires us all to never lose faith in our own strength and to believe in the power of new beginnings. If you found this story inspiring, don't forget to like and subscribe to Life Stories for more heartwarming and empowering tales. Stay tuned for the next chapter of resilience, hope, and human connection. See you soon.